Heat rose off the Caliche road in shimmers, and the flies had ideas of their own. In the summer of 1873, two Texas settlements that shared a creek and little else settled into the kind of rivalry that only places without much to do can sustain. North Fork had the post office and the bigger church bell. South Crossing had the rail spur and a saloon with a piano that could still hold a tune on Thursdays. They borrowed preachers, traded beef, and sent boys across the creek for baseball when Fever wasn't in town. It began with dueling signs and mock proclamations, each town pretending the other was a suburb or renamed as an insult, and once everyone pretended, nobody wanted to stop. The first real prank arrived on a wagon that looked honest enough. Two South Crossing cowhands discovered a prize pig at the county fair that squealed like a stuck door, and they bought it with pooled wages. At midnight, they smuggled the pig into the church vestibule, tied a string to its tail, and ran it out a window. When the bell for morning service rang, they tugged, and the congregation arrived to a screeched hymn that sent hats flying. North Fork laughed, then swore they would answer in kind. Sheriff Avery, badge and limp, warned at the next cattle auction he'd jail anyone caught trespassing with livestock and rope. They applauded and ignored him. North Fork answered with a stink brew, horsehair and sulfur boiled into a tincture. Boys stuffed rags beneath South Crossing's saloon. When Manny struck the first chord, the heat roused a ghost of smell that sent men gagging into the street. South Crossing vowed to retake the initiative with something grander. They chose the water tower. Two scaffolders climbed the ladder with buckets of whitewash and, by lantern light, painted the name of North Fork's most proper widow on the tank, in letters 3 men high. Mrs. Adeline Gage loves South Crossing. By noon, the county heard. Adeline accepted the commotion with folded arms and a silence that promised winters inside any man who dared laugh in her hearing. The whitewash would come down, she said, and meanwhile she would keep her grocery closed to South Crossing money. That afternoon, men from both towns bought flour in cash. By late summer, the pranks acquired moving parts. A team from North Fork lowered 1/2 mile of South Crossing's clothesline, leaving shirts and Sunday drawers in the dust like surrendered flags. South Crossing retaliated by setting firecrackers under the benches of North Fork's schoolhouse during arithmetic, which sent numbers and children into the rafters. Sheriff Avery met with both town councils and set down 3 rules: no fire, no dynamite, and no livestock inside places of worship. They agreed, then argued. That is how the barrel race came to be. North Fork hollowed 3 whiskey barrels, fitted wheels, and rigged them into a string. In full daylight, they rolled the barrels across the bridge, each bearing a sign: tax relief, fair wages, and better roads. A crowd gathered because they always do. The barrels, it turned out, were full of feathers. When the mayor of South Crossing climbed onto a crate to declaim about paying for bridges other people used, a boy yanked a rope and a cloud of down coated the mayor like a molting goose. The laughter was enormous and unforgivable. The first gunshot wasn't meant for anyone. That night, South Crossing men crept to the river with a sack of flour and spoons. Their plan was to dust North Fork's horses so the morning would rise on an entire herd of ghostly mounts. Someone tripped over a tent stake, a revolver went off into the air, and North Fork's guard fired at the muzzle flash. Nobody was hit, but the noise drew more guns, and shadows began to look like enemies. When Sheriff Avery arrived, he collected pistols into his hat until the brim sagged. He sent both sides home and threatened to deputize grandmothers. 3 quiet weeks followed. Cotton needed picking, and the weather held. Folks began to say the whole thing had been boys being boys, never true but always convenient. Later a wagon rolled in with a fake fair entry, a nailed coffin with a mirror inside and a paper that read, "Look alive." People roared, and so did the rivalry. The next night brought real fire, though none aimed for it. a North Fork crew dragged 2 bales of hay onto South Crossing's boardwalk to build a fake gallows for a puppet of their rival mayor, hoping for a sunrise joke. A knocked-over lantern turned the gag into a wall of flame that climbed porch posts and licked at the front of the telegraph office. Buckets flew from the creek until the flames shrank and left charred beams framing the stars. No one died, but a boy burned his forearm badly, and a gambler's parlor turned to ash. South Crossing declared the truce broken and spoke of dignity in rifle caliber. On the bridge that divided them, the towns finally met. It was a Sunday, hot and windless. Men arrived with rifles slung as if they were tools. Women stood at a distance, mouths tight. Sheriff Avery, gray hat and limp, stepped onto the planks and told them what would come if someone fired. He spoke about funerals and the way little boys learned to count headstones. For a moment, it worked. Then a drunken rider took a swing at a young deputy with a rope end. The deputy stumbled, and the first bullet cracked off a handrail. In the echo, someone fired for real. The fight lasted minutes and undid years. Smoke stitched the bridge. 2 men from North Fork fell, one with a hole that emptied him where he stood. A South Crossing blacksmith took a shot through the thigh and lived to curse it for years. The sheriff, reaching for a rifle, caught a splinter that opened his cheek and kept shouting until the gun stuttered into silence. Nobody could say afterward who fired first. Everyone remembered who fell. The bridge acquired dark patches that did not bleach in sun. A traveling judge fined both towns, ordered repairs, and told the sheriff to lock up rifles for a season. It satisfied no one and prevented funerals, which was enough. Pranks did not end. They got smaller and private. A sack of pecans went missing and reappeared in a church bell tower. A chalk pig snout adorned the door of a councilman who had never forgiven feathers. Manny's piano returned to tune. Adeline Gage reopened her grocery to anyone with cash and the sense to keep eyes down when she counted change. The boys who had dusted horses grew into men who rode them to weddings and funerals. When they told the story later, they laughed at the barrels and the pig, softened the fire, and skipped the bridge unless the room was quiet. Years later, a state survey crew came through to place markers and measure distances for a proper road. They asked the old men on the benches what to call the crossing. The old men looked across the creek to where pecans had swallowed the bridge footing and said after a long chew the best name was Truce. The surveyor wrote Truce Bridge in his ledger and underlined it twice. On the new map, the towns sat on either side of the word, as if it were a nail holding them still. In the end, the prank war produced no winners, only a story people called funny until someone asked about the dead. The humor lay in the ingenuity, the pig, the barrels, the water tower, but the meaning settled with the bullets. The frontier was not a theater for boys. It was a thin place where pride traveled faster than news, and where a joke could become a pistol shot before the punchline landed. The creek kept moving. Cotton seasons came and went. The whitewash weathered off the tank, then the tank itself rusted into memory. What remained was Sheriff Avery's lesson. You can chase a laugh into a grave, and the grave will not laugh back. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.